What's up everyone, today I want to talk about one of the best and fastest sorcerer builds in Diablo 4 Season 6, and it's a Chain Lightning and Lightning Spear build that gives massive burst damage and really fast clear speed. This build is perfect for speed farming things in Torment 6, Hell Tides, Nightmare Dungeons, Infernal Hordes, anything you want to get done in Torment 4, this build can do it. Not only that, but it's pretty tanky. You can take it in the pit and it holds out really well. Here it is in a 75, just zooming through, no problem. So you can push this quite hard in the pit if you put the time into getting your gear, getting your glyphs leveled. So let's talk more about the build. All of our damage comes from two areas. First, we use the Axial Conduit unique legs, which make our Chain Lightning orbit around us, and they bounce to nearest enemies, letting us hold multiple Chain Lightnings at a time, and then once we get near enemies, they'll bounce around 3 times and then pop for big damage. The next part of this that makes up this build is the aspect of Splintering Energy. This was massive last season, made some of the best builds, and it still holds out now. So what this does is every time your Lightning Spear critically hits, Lightning arcs out and deals damage. This damage is multiplied by your critical damage percent. Right now, with average gear, mine is at 3000. So this damage is huge. And we've got two ways of summoning the Lightning Spears. One is from our Unstable Currents. Whenever we use a shock spell, it will let out more lightning spells. And the other is whenever we pick up a Crackling Energy, we have a chance to spawn a Lightning Spear. So yeah, this is just pure chaos of lightning just zipping around and bursting everywhere. There's a lot more extra stuff to this build, such as the summons we use and how we trigger burning and things like that. So let's get into everything in more detail, starting with the skill tree. Okay, so from the top, 2 points into any basic skill. I went with Firebolt, doesn't matter, but you need to put 2 points in to get into your core skills. And your core skills, we go all in on Chain Lightning. Now, this is one of our main ways to deal damage, so you 5-point that. I'm getting more here from items like the Axial Conduit alone gives a big chunk, and then you can masterwork even more. You can get this much higher as well. Then you want to take Enhanced for crit, and then Greater for increased damage every time it bounces. We take all 3 of these defensives here: Flame Shield, Teleport, and Ice Armor. Now, the reason we take Flame Shield is because it's a barrier, which is good, but it's a fire skill, and it's the only fire skill we have on our ability. So we use Tower Radar's Iridescent Loop, which is a ring, and that ring says that whenever you cast a Pyromancy, Shock, or Frost skill, you increase your damage to 25% per element. So you want all 3 of those abilities on your bar, and this is the only fire skill we have on our bar. It's the only fire skill we need. So yeah, you need this one. Then we take Teleport. It's a shock skill. It's a mobility skill. So it causes more lightning spears to form, which is great. But the main part is Mystical Teleport. Every time you land, you summon a Crackling Energy per enemy you hit. So if you land into a bunch, that's 3 Crackling Energies. The reason Crackling Energy is so important is because in our enchantments, we use Lightning Spear. Absorbing a Crackling Energy has a 10% chance to conjure a Lightning Spear. So we're basically, with our teleport, getting 2 sources of Lightning Spear summon. 1 from our ultimate, and 2 from the Crackling Energy. So this is really good. And if you had any spare points, if you want to take any points out somewhere else, I'd put them into this to reduce the cooldown. But you know, we're a bit strapped on points. But yeah, this is really key, these 2. Okay, Glass Cannon, huge damage boost. In every single build, I'd recommend Glass Cannon. Okay, now into the conjurations. And this is a little technical if you've never played Sorcerer before, you know, if it's your first season, but I'll try and keep it simple. We take the Ice Swords here, the Ice Summon, 1 point into here, 1 point into Enhanced, and 1 point into Summoned. This is so good because, especially on bosses and on like big packs of elites in like high pit runs, you summon these Ice Swords. Every time they hit a vulnerable enemy, they reduce their own cooldown, and then they reduce all of your other abilities' cooldowns. So the more of these you have out, the more of the cooldowns they're reducing, letting you get more out and more of your other abilities out. This is really, really good. It works really well with like getting your shields back off cooldown and with getting your ultimate back off cooldown. Okay, now on the Familiar, we put 1 point into here and 1 point into Enhanced. The reason we want to enhance the Familiar is because when you summon a Fire Familiar, you will burn enemies over 4 seconds. And this is our only way to burn enemies. So all of the perks we get for burn enemies, like this cluster here, certain things in the Paragon board, we only get from this. So it's really important. However, you're probably thinking, well, you've not got it on your bar. There's no way to summon it. You're a fool. And yeah, but I think there's a problem. I don't know if this is intended, but it works really well in this build with how it's working. So if we were to put this on our bar, you can see on your bar, it's classed as a Pyromancy Familiar, which means it would burn enemies. So if we just use it, it summons a Fire Familiar that burns our enemies, which is perfect. But the strange thing is, I'll just keep it on the bar for now. Actually, no, I'll take it off the bar to show you. If we pop our ultimate, so you see now there's no Familiar. If we pop our ultimate, this, every time you use a shock skill, a random core, conjuration, or mastery shock skill is unleashed. So if we use that, and then we start using shock skills, We're summoning 5 familiars. Yeah, this is really good. Shout out to the sorcerers on Discord. I saw talking about this. It works really well in this build. So thank you to whoever found this originally. This is huge. It saves us using Firebolt as a source of burning. It saves us putting like Hydra with burning damage on our bar, which is really good. So yeah, huge. Okay, the last thing on here is Lightning Spear. 1 point in here, 1 point in enhanced, and then 1 point in invoked, so that it can stun enemies when it crits. The reason we don't put 5 in here is because we don't care about Lightning Spear's damage. The damage comes from when you crit with Lightning Spear, you trigger the big damage, not the Lightning Spear damage itself. So yeah, just 1 point in there. Okay, then we go 1 point into Align the Elements and 3 points into Protection for a barrier. We go 3 points into Conjuration Mastery for damage, speed, and mana regen, and 3 points into Mana Shield for damage reduction, 40% mana reduction. You can see how all these things that have 1 in, it's just because of the chess piece that gives 1 to all passives. Really nice chess piece. Yeah, don't be confused. Anything you see that's blue, that's just all that is. Okay, down to here, we go 1 point into Inner Flame, so we can go 3 points into Devouring Blaze. 28% increased crit strike damage against burning enemies. And because of this, we get that burning on all enemies that are, you know, up long enough. Down here we go 3 points into Static Discharge, crit strikes with Shock, form a Crackling Energy, and then 3 points into here, Absorbing Crackling Energy gives you mana. And this works really well at counteracting the Chain Lightning mana problem. So every time the Chain Lightning bounces back to you, you lose mana, but every time you pick up energy, you gain mana. So it's like it helps you keep really high amounts of Chain Lightning going. Down here, we go 3 points into Elemental Synergy for increased damage. We go 3 points into cooldown reduction on Evocation. We go 5 points into Unstable Currents. The reason we do that is for the cooldown. So you can see at 1 point, it's 50 something seconds. And at 5 points, it's 40 something seconds. So really, really good. We take Prime, and then we take Supreme for the Crackling Energy that spawn. And then we go 3 points into Coursing Currents for Shock Seals, increase your crit strike chance. And then finally, Electrocution. Enemies deal less damage after being shocked, after being crit struck by shock skills, which happens a lot in this build. Yeah, that's everything. And finally, we go for the juiced out, big passive Enlightenment. This is just carrying this season. It's so good. You know, you gain damage, mana regen, and attack speed just by playing the game. It just keeps ramping up, hits 100 stacks, and gives you those big buffs. Really good. I think most builds are carrying this right now. I think I've got it in all of my builds. It's just so strong. But yeah, that's everything in the skill tree. Like I say, if there's anything you disagree with, anything you want to move around, I put points into Teleport. And then on the enchantments, there's a few options here. Here's what I've gone with. First, Lightning Spear. I think this is probably mandatory in this build for how I've got it. Absorbing a Crackling Energy has a 10% chance to conjure a Lightning Spear. That's huge. Lightning Spear's got like a 15-20 second cooldown depending on your build. So having it on your bar, you're going to be not using it as often as you might want. But with the amount of Crackling Energies you can get in this build, you summon a lot. So this is really good. Then I went with the Ice Conjuration. I think this is really good. Every 40 seconds in cooldown you summon one of these, which is good because if you look at the ultimate, that's 43 seconds. So huge. And our shields are like 15 seconds. And these cooldowns come down fast. This really helps you ramp up if you're doing bosses, pushing the pit, anything that stays up for a long time, that's going to really pay off. If you're just speed clearing things, maybe you could go for something like Teleport. That would let you get around a little bit faster. You could maybe go for Chain Lightning. After spending 100 mana, you form a Chain Lightning. There's a few things you could take here. You could drop off the Familiar and go for Firebolt. But yeah, this is what I've got, and this is what I've used for a while, and it's working really well. Onto the Mercenaries. So there's some options. I think in almost all my videos, I'm saying how good Vayana is, and in this one, it works again, but for different reasons. So in the build that I've got a full build down below, which we can look through if you want to look at all the gear and stuff. But I've gone with Esu's Heirloom, and you can see crit damage is huge in this build, and this has a lot of crit damage. On top of this, your crit strike chance is increased by your movement speed bonus. So I've gone with Vayana because of the main ability here, Massacre. You and Vayana stack Massacre together. Certain stack thresholds grant movement speed. At 100 stacks, you gain 20% movement speed. So that works really well. And then additionally at the bottom, her Whirlwind pulls in enemies, which is really good for clustering them together when your Chain Lightning pops and deals damage in a big area. So I think this works really well. There's certain things that give crit, there's certain things that give other things, but I feel like this one is just a lot more uptime. Like you see it a lot, it works a lot. So that's what I like. On the reinforcement, I've gone with Rahia, and I've just gone with Provoke. damage reduction. 5% damage reduction for each target, up to 20%. This is a, you know, sorcerer, we can get a bit squishy at times, so I just have this constant damage reduction popping in all the time. Cast whenever a player casts any skill. As soon as it comes off cooldown, big damage reduction. So yeah, that's what I've got. Okay, so let's go over the gear and the stats, and I'm going to use the Mobalytics build I've made for this. This is all linked down below, so you can go and check all this out whenever you want, but it's just really easy to show the gear on here. So let's talk about it. There's a full end game build for pushing Torment 4, so it does have a lot of uniques, does have mythic uniques, but you can get into Torment 4 quite early on with this build. So let's go through it first. Air of Perdition on the helmet, crit strike chance, lucky hit chance, movement speed, and core skills. This is pretty much everything you want. Crit strike is needed for our aspect of Splintering Energy to proc the lightning hits, and movement speed works with our Essu's Heirloom, which gives us increased crit strike based on our movement speed. So it all kind of comes together. And then the core skills works on our Chain Lightning, which is a big damage increase. So on top of that, you get the special effect of 60% increased damage. Then we go for Shroud of False Death. Stats, life, resource gen, and the big one is the +1 to all passives. The sorcerer has some banging passives. Big damage increase, big cooldown reduction, mana, loads of things come from like one passive. So having +1 to all is huge. If you don't have this, I would use the Raiment, the Raiment, the chess piece, where you move into an enemy and everything gets sucked in. That's a pretty good one. I think this works better. Then aspect of the Orange Herald on the chest, lucky hit, up to a chance when you damage an enemy to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate. This build is focused heavily around the ultimate, and every time our ultimate is up, we have more chance of summoning Lightning Spears, which gives us more chance of proccing the Splintering Energy, big massive damage. So very, very good on this build. Axial Conduit, we've already talked about that a ton, but that's how our Chain Lightning is formed. It spawns, it orbits around us, it pings out, destroys everything, and pops. Really, really good. Essu's Heirloom, movement speed, crit strike damage, just all round good boots when we're looking really hard for crit. It's got it all really. So yeah, really good. Now I want to talk about the aspect of Splintering Energy. You put on a two-handed weapon for double the effect, and this is your big damage. This is where you're pushing the pits with. It's important to know the difference between Lightning Spear and the lightning that forms from it. They're two different things. We don't care about Lightning Spear's damage. Critical hits with Lightning Spear cause the lightning to arc. So we've only got one point in Lightning Spear, but what we want to do is make that lightning arc appear, because when it appears, that does the big damage, because that lightning arc is increased by your crit strike damage bonus, which is going to be in the thousands. So yeah, don't worry about putting points into Lightning Spear. Don't worry about getting things like chance to deal double damage with Lightning Spear. All that stuff is not important in this build. All you care about is crit strike damage, pushing that as high as possible. Okay, then we go for aspect of Shredding Blades. So your chance to apply vulnerable is increased by 20%, and vuln duration is increased, and you gain vuln damage. It's like a 3-in-1, really good on bosses. This build needs the help on bosses, so that is really, really good. Tower Shard's Iridescent Loop, we talked about it. Casting a Pyromancy, Shock, or Frost skill increases your damage, and they stack together. We've got Pyromancy, we've got lots of Shock, and we've got a few Frost, so really good. And then Ring of Starless Skies, the Mage King. I think this is incredible on like every sorcerer build. Attack speed, crit chance, lucky hit chance, core skills, and you get the primary resource, reduction cost, and increased damage. This is just incredible. I've tried different aspects, but I just always come back to it. Now let's talk about stats and masterworking. Basically, to keep it simple, crit strike damage. Everywhere you can get crit strike damage, go for it. It's the key thing. You don't have much to look for in terms of stats. You've only got 3 items that aren't, uniques. But yeah, any stat you can get, intelligence, crit strike damage. They're your main things to look for. So I'd say like on the gloves, crit strike damage, intelligence, ranks to Chain Lightning. On the weapon, crit strike damage, intelligence, I like resource cost reduction. And then on the neck, there's your big chase item. Ancestrals seem even harder to get than uniques this season, so good luck trying to find this. But if you do get lucky enough, this is what you're looking for. Devouring Blaze and Glass Cannon. They are the big boosts. They're going to give you massive damage boosts. Having that is like having a whole new aspect. It's huge. So yeah, that's what I'll be looking for. When it comes to tempering, we want to be tempering crit strike damage, of course. So any offensive temper would be crit strike damage. So the weapon, the neck, and then the gloves. I think we do it on all 3. Yeah, all 3, we can do crit strike damage. So temper all 3 of those with crit. Then you can do like movement speed to help with the boots on utility. You can do lucky hit chance. You can do chance for Chain Lightning to trigger twice, things like that. All those are pretty useful, but the main ones that you'll be looking for, the deal breakers, if you can't get crit strike damage, if you can't get that roll, throw the item away or use it for a different build. But yeah, you need crit strike. That's your main damage dealer. Wow, that's everything really. That's pretty much all of the gear, all of the build. I guess now we talk about rune words and gems. Pretty simple. I would go for back cry. So back is as you travel, you gain offering, and then cry, evoke the Spiritborn's vortex, dealing damage and pulling in enemies. This just helps cluster things together. We've binned off the unique chest for Shroud of False. You know, I think this is better. I think this is better than the chest that sucks everything in, the raiment. I think this works better. So as a replacement, I would take this to still have that grouping things in together. Then on the other side, I'd go for Eom. So cast a skill with a cooldown, which we'll be doing a lot of because we've got super fast cooldown reduction, and then reduce your active cooldowns by 0.1 seconds. So works pretty well. You get 50 for that, and you get 0.1 every 100. So that works pretty well. Yeah, that's everything. You're just going to be zooming around. Things are going to be sucking in, and you're going to be popping all with all the different lightnings. Wow. On the gems, I'd go for, of course, crit strike damage on the weapons. I'd go for intelligence topazes on your armor, and I would make sure that you have the crit strike damage on your weapons. I'd have the gems in your weapons, and then I'd have the runes in your armor. That's how I would do it. And then I'd just go skulls for armor in all of your accessories. Yeah, that's what's up. Okay, now for the Paragon board. I'm gonna show this in game rather than go through it on Mobalytics, because on there I've shown the full board, 300 plus 320 points, whatever, 350 points, whatever it is. And that shows all of the points, everywhere you can go. But in game, I'm only at like 250, 260. So I can show the main things to go for. They're both the same, you know, I'm going to work towards filling it just like that. But this is going to show you the main things to focus on if you're in a similar situation to me, or, you know, less than me. You can see the main things to go for. So we start out main board, and we go both sides. We go to the middle, and we get Flame Feeder. For every 5 decks, you deal increased damage to burning targets. That's huge because we have the familiar, which, you know, triggers the burning. And you deal 10% increased damage to burning enemies, which is huge. Then we get enough stuff around it to trigger it. I've got like 59 out of 25 there. We go down both sides for non-physical and damage to elites. The first board we go for is the fundamental release. I flipped it this way, and then we go left. We get this little cluster of nodes here for damage reduction. This cluster here for crit strike damage, which is essential. So you can see here, most of it's burning enemies, but here we get 30% crit strike damage. Every single board I've picked here, I've picked because if there is crit strike damage in abundance on the board, I've picked it. So yeah, we go for this for the crit strike, and then we get the legendary. Each time you apply Vuln or critically strike an enemy, they take up to 30% increased damage, which is perfect. On the node, I've gone for Elementalist. Grants a bonus to rare nodes, and then dealing damage increases damage you deal to them. That increases the damage of these non-physical damage and vulnerable damage, which is good because our ice conjurations make enemies vulnerable. So yeah, really good. Second board, we come across through the left, and we go to the what's the board called? Burning Instinct. Now, I've changed this board like 3 times in the last week alone. This is what I've gone for. Doesn't make sense at first, because we don't take this. We don't deal burning damage, so we don't care about our burning damage. What we do care about is crit, and this has crit damage. So this has got a few sources of crit damage, lot 60% crit, 30% crit. So this is a really good board, even though we're losing the node. So yeah, if you're low on points, if you're like 200 or less, I would skip these 2 clusters here, and I just rock it straight down the middle, have it rotate this way, rock it straight down the middle, and get 30% crit damage and damage to burning enemies, and the crit damage around it, look, 15% crit, 15% crit. Get those, come up around here, and get the node and destruction. For every 5 decks, you deal 20%, or whatever your percent is, increased crit strike damage. The second reason this board is so good is because look at the amount of dex nodes. I've got this at 74 out of 25, meaning we're getting like 309% extra crit strike damage. And my glyph is a low level. My glyph's like 45. If you get your glyph to 100, that number ramps up massively. So yeah, on top of that, you have damage to burning enemies, and you have 60% crit strike damage. Absolutely huge. Crit strike damage. This board is just much better than it looks. Okay, next board we go for is the Frigid Fate. Okay, we come down here, max life. Low on points, skip that little section for now. Come up here, bit of lucky hit, which is useful in this build. Grab the node, Frigid Fate. You deal damage to vulnerable enemies equal to 20% total amount of bonus damage with cold up to maximum 60. It's not much, but it only costs us like 3 points. Wrap it around here. We get vuln damage. Down to here, we get the exploit node. For every 5 decks purchased within range, you deal 7% increased damage to vulnerable targets. I've changed this recently. I need to put some points in. There you go. Okay. Right. Dealing damage to vulnerable enemies increases your damage by 1% up to 6 seconds, up to 10%. So pretty good board. Nothing crazy here. As we go down, it's worth getting this little cluster of vulnerable damage. Come into the final board, we go for Static Surge. After spending 86 mana, your next cast of Chain Lightning makes enemies vulnerable, perfect, and restores mana, which counteracts the Axial Conduit. So as you come in, get this cluster here, damage to stunned enemies, resource cost reduction, come into the middle here, Unleash. We go for the Unleash node, gives a bonus to magic nodes, and gives you increased mana regen. The magic nodes in question are these ones here. Lightning damage, lightning damage, lightning damage, crit strike damage, crit strike damage, crit strike damage. I've changed this so much over the last week. I'm finally at a point where I feel like I was ready to say, you know, I don't want to change it anymore. I think this is for me exactly how I want it. If you want to change anything, there are some boards out there that do pretty cool stuff. I'd say the Enchantment Master board works really well with the Ice Conjuration enchantment we've got. There's some other good boards for damage, and there's some good things. Certain glyphs you can change around if you want. You can see I've tried to level quite a few, but yeah, this is how I like it. The main ones that I would keep would be the ones where we hit the legendary node. If you want to bin this out for a different one with the legendary node, go for it. But yeah, that's how I've got it. Yeah, that's everything really. That's the whole build. That's the whole video. So yeah, if this has helped, if you like this style, do consider subscribing to the channel. I make a ton of builds and guides every new Diablo season. Path of Exile's coming up. I'm going to be all over that too. So if you like the sound of that, do consider subscribing. If you have any questions about the build, anything you want to ask, anything that you're not sure of, let me know down below. But that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.